What's up, guys? Welcome to the line change. In this video, we're going to be talking about the battle for 2C, and we're going to go over who's going to win it at training camp. Right now, it's between two particular players, that being Filip and Aatu. We're going to go over an article that talks about this, and then at the end, I'm going to give you my take and who I think will win the battle for the quote-unquote battle for 2C at training camp. But before we dive into that, I'm going to do as I always do, give a big shout out and thank you to my sponsor, Gassy Jack Art, maker of this amazing artwork you see here behind me. And you guys can check them out yourselves at GassyJackArt.com. You guys can also check him out on Instagram at GassyJackArt. I have a link to his website in the description down below. So let's go ahead and take a look at this article from our friends at Canucks Army, in particular, Stefan Roger. And he goes on to say, perhaps the real second-line centers were the friends we made along the way. The Vancouver Canucks entered the 2025 offseason with a new 2C as the number one item on their shopping list, and barring a last-minute out-of-left-field trade, it seems they'll also exit the 2025 offseason with a new 2C as the number one item on their shopping list. So basically, nothing's changed. They did not acquire that elusive 2C that they've been looking for this offseason. And I would say, technically, as was mentioned, barring a last-minute out-of-left-field trade, the offseason has officially ended. It is now September 2nd. You could say it's almost the start of preseason. Although the Canucks added no new centers to the organization at all this summer, save for those they selected in the entry draft, who will need a few years before they reach the roster, that doesn't mean they're entirely bereft at the 2C position. Someone is going to have to play that role, and the battle for who starts there will occur in training camp 2025, which is about a little over 2 weeks away. From our perspective, it's essentially a two-horse race between Filip and Aatu, as I mentioned at the start of this video. First, we'll break down the upcoming battle between the two of them, then we'll contradict ourselves slightly and explain why it may not be a quote-unquote battle at all. Chytil enters the season as a presumptive 2C, or at least a center ranked second on the depth chart behind Elias Pettersson. On that front, he possesses several distinct advantages over Raty. The checkboard is the older of the two, set to turn 26 in a mere few days. During camp, while Raty hits age 23 a month into the season, he's got 393 career NHL games to Raty's 48. And really, the experience gap is actually larger than that due to all the time Chytil has missed with injury. If we're talking NHL seasons, Chytil has appeared in 8 to Raty's 3. Between the two, it was Chytil who was drafted higher at 21st overall in 2017 compared to Raty's 52nd overall in 2021. That said, if we're talking about pre-draft hype in general, we must note that Raty spent much of his youth being talked about in phenom terms, only to slip heavily in his draft year and wind up in the second round. Remember, there was talk Raty could go first overall. In terms of established scoring, it's no surprise that Chytil has a serious leg up. He scored as many as 22 goals and 45 points in the season back in 22-23 and has always seemed to have the potential for more. On the topic of production, however, we begin to be able to turn the quote-unquote argument back in Raty's favor. Last season, Raty went on his longest run of NHL play to date, and he put up fairly decent numbers too, with 7 goals and 11 points in 33 games. Isolate just Raty's last call-up, which started on March 24th, 2025, and you'll find him finishing the year with 5 goals and 7 points in his final 12 games. It's a small sample size, to be sure, but it is a higher pace of scoring than Chytil has hit at really any point in his own career. If what Raty did during the final months of the 24-25 season is in any way sustainable, maybe there's an argument to be made for greater potency potential. Oddly enough, the two's goals per game rate for 24-25 ended up being very similar, with Chytil edging out Raty out 0.23 to 0.21. Chytil's point per game rate of 0.46, of course, beat Raty handedly. If we eliminate Chytil's time in New York, however, we find their Vancouver-only rates have Raty with the higher goal per game rate, 0.21 to 0.13, Chytil with a narrower lead on points per game, 0.40 to 0.33. Going minute by minute, Ratu's numbers start to stand out. However, he had a 1.77 points per 60 rate in 24-25, good for the fourth highest on the team. Chytil, meanwhile, who is loaded up with ice time following his acquisition and before his injury, languished in 27th place with a 0.61 points per 60 average, placing him one spot below Carson Soucy on the list. And then you probably know where the goals per 60 side of this is headed. Raty led the entire Canucks roster with 1.24 goals per 60 ahead of Pius Suter with 1.05. Among those who played at least 20 NHL games this year, Raty's goals per 60 ranked 13th overall in the entire league. Chytil's own goals per 60 of 0.61 wasn't half bad either for the record and ranked 7th on the Canucks, just barely trailing top goal scorer Jake DeBrusk and his 0.62. Chytil is probably the safer call to produce more in 25-26 given his experience, but Raty showed enough flashes last year to say there's a real possibility that he leapfrogs Chytil if given enough opportunity to do so. Now is a good time to talk about stylistic differences because they are considerable. The largest gap between the two is definitely in skating ability, where Chytil is among the best skating members of the forward group, while Raty is among the worst. According to NHL Edge, Chytil was in the 90th percentile for both top skating speed and speed burst exceeding 20 miles per hour. Raty was below the 50th percentile in every skating measure. Specifically, Canuck fans probably noticed that Chytil isn't just great at skating, but he's great at skating with the puck. We saw that when he was traded and during his first few games, which makes him a genuine play driver. It's something the Canucks don't really have at all down the middle right now, aside from Chytil, at least until Pettersson is back to his old self. The book on Raty, on the other hand, has always portrayed his skating as his greatest shortcoming. There's a big disparity here. But Raty has some positive qualities working out in his favor. He's got that famous ambidextrous face-off ability, on top of being perhaps the best face-off taker in the organization in general, with the departures of both Bo Horvat and JT Miller. Raty has a 56.7% win rate on the dot in his career compared to Chytil's 41.7%. That alone should ensure that whether he's the official 2C or not, Raty is on the ice for crucial moments in tight games all the same. Though it's something he's added to his game only recently, Raty is also definitely the more physical and physically involved of the two. Both skaters stand at 6'2", and Chytil has 20 pounds on Raty as of their last weigh-in, but Raty is sturdier and more durable. If anything, the Canucks want Chytil to avoid unnecessary physicality, given his concussion history and injury proneness, which further encourages Raty to embrace that side of the game. Raty is undoubtedly the better and more consistent shooter of the two. When it comes to playmaking, they each bring something a little different to the table. Chytil is the kind of playmaker who can create space for his teammates with his speed and then distribute the puck. Raty is more cerebral in his approach, which has earned him accolades for running the power play down in Abbotsford. Perhaps that's a reason to pencil Raty in, if not as outright 2C, then at least the main pivot on the PP2 unit. Really though, their stylistic differences lead us neatly enough into the part of the article where we suggest there may not be much of a training camp quote-unquote battle to be had between Chytil and Raty after all. It's already been all but determined that the Canucks will have to take a more of a top 9 approach to their forwards than a top 6 approach in 25-26. As they attempt to produce more by committee, that means they'll need 3 centers for those 3 scoring lines, and those 3 centers are basically locked in as being Pettersson, Chytil, and Raty in some order. Pettersson will get first choice of wingers, or more accurately, the team will put the wingers with Pettersson who best suit him and his oh-so-necessary bounce back. The rest are left for Chytil and Raty. And given how different they are as centers, it's maybe less a game of building a quote-unquote second line and a quote-unquote third line, and more about lining up the centers and wingers that will work best together. For a shooting center like Raty, one imagines that the playmaking Connor Garland could be a great fit. Meanwhile, if one's looking for a high-volume shooter to make use of the space Chytil creates, look no further than Evander Kane, who serves the bonus purpose of watching Chytil's back from the Jason Dickinsons of the world. Maybe it's Niels Höglander going into the corners and digging out pucks for Aatu, who stays mostly in the middle of the zone to compensate for his speed shortcomings. Maybe it's the speed of Kiefer Sherwood keeping up with Chytil from the wing. The configurations are endless, and they'll surely be shuffled throughout both camp and the regular season itself. The point we're getting at here, however, is that it might be less about one of Chytil or Aatu, quote-unquote, winning the battle for 2C at training camp, and more about the coaching staff using the opportunity to build the best 3 forward lines they can around their 3 top centers. And then who really cares about how those lines are labeled? Pettersson's line will receive the most opportunities, but will also have to carry a higher defensive load than in previous seasons. Chytil's line will probably play more like Ratu's, given his proven ability to handle more minutes and miles. But then maybe it's Ratu's line coming out for those vital late faceoffs. It's an ambiguous conclusion to be sure, but then this is a Vancouver forward group that is built on ambiguity. If the Canucks are going to succeed in their bid to return to the playoffs in 2026, their forwards will need to be greater than the sum of their parts, and both Chytil and Aatu will have to be key components in that, or at least until GM Patrick Allvin pulls the trigger on another option. Then again, if both Chytil and Aatu enjoy success early on in 25-26, maybe Allvin won't have to. So that is the article. I'll leave a link to it in the description down below. You guys can give it a read yourselves at your own pace. But in conclusion, if I want to go ahead and say who will win the quote-unquote battle for 2C, I have to give it to Filip. He just edges it out for me. I just think Filip, due to his age and his experience, has a bit of a leg up on Aatu, as was mentioned in this article. Now, that is not me downplaying Aatu. I think Aatu has a lot of potential, and he has a lot more upside than Filip due to his age. And I do think down the line, Aatu will absolutely be a second-line center. But for this upcoming season, I do think I have to give the edge to Filip. He will be the quote-unquote bona fide 2C to start the season. And then who knows, maybe there will be a in-season trade for the Canucks later on to upgrade their second-line center position. But I want to know from you Canucks fans, what do you guys think? Who do you guys think will win the quote-unquote battle for 2C at training camp? Do you think it'll be Filip, or do you think that Aatu will usurp Filip and will emerge as the second-line center for the Vancouver Canucks? Let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think. And as always, if you guys like this video, be sure to hit that like button. If you want to stay up to date on all your Vancouver Canucks content, be sure to smash that subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you don't miss a single video. You can find and interact with us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok, as well as Blue Sky. Blue Sky is not listed, but it is at The Line Change. And feel free to give us a follow on all of our social media platforms. If you prefer an audio version of this podcast, you can find us on both Spotify and Apple Podcasts. On Spotify, feel free to give us a follow, as well as rate and review us. It is, of course, greatly appreciated and really helps out the podcast. But that's going to do it for me. As always, let's go Canucks, and I'll see you guys in the next video.